What if the millionaire you once mocked in high school was now the only person who could save your family? It was a chilly autumn afternoon, and the streets of downtown Boston bustled with hurried footsteps and honking horns. Business people in sharp suits passed by without sparing a glance at those who had fallen through the cracks of society. But for one man, that day was about to change everything. Ethan Marshall, a self-made millionaire known for his shrewd business instincts and ice-cold demeanor, stepped out of his black sedan and walked toward the crosswalk. He wasn't the type to stop and admire the scenery or make small talk. His life had been built on discipline, efficiency, and detachment. But that day, a subtle tug in his chest forced him to glance sideways. There, on the edge of the sidewalk, sat a woman on a tattered blanket, her face worn and tired, eyes sunken with exhaustion. Her hair was tangled, her clothes threadbare. She was holding two small children, twin girls, no older than 3 or 4, both dressed in mismatched, stained outfits. One of the girls was crying softly, her tiny fists rubbing at her eyes, while the other clung tightly to her mother's arm, her wide brown eyes staring into the stream of passers-by. "Sweetheart, it's okay," the woman whispered, stroking the crying girl's hair. Her voice cracked from fatigue and desperation. "Someone will help us soon." The words stopped Ethan in his tracks. There was something familiar about her voice. Her face, her eyes. He took a tentative step forward, squinting through the layers of dirt and years that had passed. "Olivia?" The woman looked up slowly, and their eyes met. Hers widened, stunned into silence. For a brief moment, time stood still between them. "Ethan?" she whispered, her voice trembling. He hadn't seen Olivia Dawson in over a decade. She was the girl he had once admired from afar in high school, the cheerleader with the radiant smile and a voice like springtime. She never noticed him back then, except to laugh at his awkwardness. He'd been the quiet one, the scholarship kid with hand-me-down clothes and dreams bigger than his zip code. And now the roles had reversed in a way neither could have imagined. "I can't believe it's you," Ethan said, his voice low with shock and concern. Olivia quickly looked down, shielding her daughters as if trying to hide her shame. "Please, just go," she said quietly. "We're fine." Ethan's eyes scanned the scene. They weren't fine, not even close. The little girl still whimpered in her mother's lap, and the other looked pale and underfed. "You're not fine," he said firmly. "Come with me. I'll help you." "No," she replied quickly, her arms wrapping tighter around her girls. "We don't need anything." But Ethan wasn't asking. He couldn't just walk away, not now, not when he saw the pain in Olivia's face. Not when 2 little girls were cold, hungry, and frightened. "You don't have to do this alone," he said softly, crouching down to her level. "Let me help you. At least come get warm. There's food, a safe place to sleep." Her eyes filled with tears. She wanted to refuse, but exhaustion was winning. The weight of too many sleepless nights, too many skipped meals, and too many prayers unanswered made her hands shake. One of the twins, still crying, reached a hand out to Ethan, curious, unafraid. Olivia looked into Ethan's eyes. They were no longer the shy boy's eyes she remembered. They were strong, compassionate, and steady. With a silent nod, she relented. Ethan stood and pulled out his phone. "Charles, I need the car. Corner of Tremont and 7th. "Right away." When the driver arrived, Ethan gently lifted one of the girls into his arms, while Olivia held the other. The twins clung to them, too tired to resist. The car was warm, a quiet refuge from the noise and cold outside. During the ride, Ethan kept stealing glances at Olivia. She looked out the window, her expression hollow. How had it come to this? How had a woman so full of life ended up begging on a street corner with 2 children? And why hadn't she reached out to anyone? He had questions. So many questions. But he said, nothing for now. As the car pulled up in front of his home, a sprawling brick estate just outside the city, Olivia stiffened. The mansion, with its glowing windows and neatly trimmed hedges, looked like something out of a dream. I don't belong here, she whispered. Yes, you do, Ethan replied. You and your girls belong somewhere safe, somewhere warm. The door opened, and his longtime housekeeper, Mrs. Holloway, stood in the entryway, her eyebrows raised at the sight of Ethan holding a child. But she didn't ask questions. She just stepped aside and let them in. Within minutes, the fireplace crackled in the living room, and hot soup was served. The girls curled up on the couch, too tired to even eat, their heads resting on Olivia's shoulders. Olivia, meanwhile, sat silently, hands in her lap, too proud to cry, but too overwhelmed to speak. Thank you, she whispered eventually, her voice so quiet it was nearly lost in the crackling of the fire. Ethan simply nodded, his eyes still on her. This wasn't pity, this wasn't obligation. It was something more. Because that night, everything changed for both of them, and neither of them knew it yet, but this moment would be the beginning of something they never expected. A journey toward healing, forgiveness, and a future neither thought they deserved. Morning light crept through the tall windows of Ethan Marshall's estate, casting golden stripes across the polished floors and soft rugs. The air inside was warm, scented faintly with fresh coffee and lemon polish. But in Olivia Dawson's heart, there was only cold. She sat on the edge of the plush guest bed, her fingers nervously tugging at a loose thread on her sleeve. Across the room, her twin daughters, Harper and Hazel, slept soundly under thick, clean blankets, their small bodies curled like kittens, finally at peace. It should have made her smile, but instead, it made the knot in her chest tighter. This room, with its silk curtains and marble-topped nightstands, felt like another world. It was a far cry from the concrete corners they'd slept on, wrapped in one another for warmth. And now, they were here, in his house, Ethan Marshall, the boy she used to tease in high school. The one she barely noticed until now. She had no idea how to accept this, or why he was doing it. Downstairs, Ethan sat in his home office, staring blankly at his laptop screen. He wasn't reading the financial report in front of him, he couldn't. All he could see was Olivia's face the night before. Pale, ashamed, proud, and hurting. She was once the sun, in a room vibrant, laughing, untouchable. Now, life had battered her, until she barely looked like the girl he remembered. And yet, something about her hadn't changed. She still carried fire in her spine, still shielded those girls with lioness energy. And he couldn't stop thinking about her. When the housekeeper knocked gently on Olivia's door, her voice was soft and practiced. Miss Dawson. Breakfast is ready. Mr. Marshall said, you and the girls are welcome to join whenever you're ready. Olivia nodded, brushing a hand over Hazel's hair. Okay, thank you. 20 minutes later, Olivia walked into the dining room, holding a sleepy Harper by the hand and carrying Hazel on her hip. Her steps were slow, cautious, as if she feared she'd leave footprints on the polished wood floors. The dining table was set like a hotel buffet, fresh fruit, scrambled eggs, pancakes, crispy bacon. Harper's eyes lit up, and she tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mummy, can I have that banana muffin?" Olivia hesitated. "Yes, baby." "Just one." From the doorway, Ethan appeared, dressed in a crisp white dress shirt and dark jeans. He looked relaxed, but his eyes searched Olivia's face like a man carrying a secret. "Good morning," he said, offering a tentative smile. "Morning," Olivia replied, her voice low. The girls climbed into chairs with small gasps of delight, giggling at the sight of butter pats shaped like little leaves. Olivia sat at the far end of the table, fidgeting with her napkin, unsure how to act in a space so calm, so foreign. Ethan waited a few minutes, watching the twins eat with wide, grateful eyes. Then, gently, he spoke. "Olivia, can we talk? Just you and me." She tensed slightly, then gave a small nod. "Girls, go with Mrs. Holloway for a bit, okay? There's a playroom down the hall." Harper and Hazel took their muffins and followed the housekeeper with quick steps. The door clicked shut behind them. Silence settled between Ethan and Olivia like a curtain. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Ethan leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. "I'm not trying to pry, but I need to understand what happened. You don't end up on a street corner with 2 kids overnight." Olivia looked down at her lap, her fingers tightening. "It's not a story I like to tell. I'm not here to judge, just to listen." She closed her eyes and exhaled. Then, quietly, she began. "After high school, I started dating Jake Miller. You probably remember him." Ethan's jaw tightened. Of course he remembered. The football star, the golden boy. The guy who got away with anything. "I thought it was real," Olivia continued. "After prom, everything moved fast. 3 months later, I found out I was pregnant." Ethan stayed silent, his eyes never leaving hers. "When I told him, he bailed. Said he wasn't ready to be a dad, that I'd ruined his life." She blinked hard, willing away the sting in her eyes. "He left. That was it." Ethan clenched his fists under the table. "My parents tried to help, but they weren't in great shape either. I got a job at a diner, then another one cleaning houses. I did everything I could to support the girls. But the bills kept stacking up. Eventually, I lost everything. The apartment. The job. The last thing I had was my pride." "And you didn't ask anyone for help?" Ethan's voice cracked slightly. "I couldn't," she said softly. "I was too ashamed. And I didn't want anyone to see me like that, especially not you." Ethan looked away, swallowing hard. "I should have done more," he said. "I could have helped." "No," she said gently. "You didn't owe me anything. You barely knew me." "But I remember you," he said, his voice firm now. "I remember how you lit up a room. And seeing you like that last night, it broke something in me." Olivia didn't know what to say. "I'm not trying to be a hero," Ethan added, "but you and your daughters deserve better, and if you'll let me, I want to help." She looked at him, really looked at him for the first time since that sidewalk. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe someone might actually mean it. "You're not alone anymore, Olivia," Ethan said, his voice quiet. "Let me be here for you." Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Instead, she nodded. Because somewhere deep inside, despite all the hurt, all the nights spent shivering under streetlights, she believed him. And that belief, however small, was the beginning of something she thought she'd lost forever: hope. The sunlight streamed gently through the tall bay windows of Ethan Marshall's mansion, casting soft golden shadows on the polished hardwood floor. On most mornings, silence had always been his companion. Quiet meals, quiet work, quiet thoughts. But this morning was different. This morning, the house was alive. Harper's giggles floated through the hallway, followed by the sound of Hazel's tiny feet pitter-pattering on the marble floor. Olivia's soft voice echoed as she chased after them with matching jackets in hand. For the first time in years, Ethan Marshall wasn't the only one awake in his home. He was no longer the only heart beating inside these walls. He stood near the staircase, watching from a distance as the girls danced around the breakfast table. Their joy was infectious. Harper was trying to balance a napkin on her head, while Hazel twirled in a new pink sweater. Olivia, standing behind them, caught Ethan's gaze and smiled, a shy, almost uncertain smile, but one that carried more warmth than any sunbeam. "Did you all sleep okay?" Ethan asked, stepping into the dining room. Hazel nodded, clutching her toast like a treasure. "It was warm," she said softly. "The bed was soft." "It felt like a cloud," Harper added, mouth full of banana slices. Olivia's eyes flickered, and for a moment, Ethan thought she might cry. Instead, she cleared her throat and pulled out a chair. "Thank you. I mean it." "You don't need to thank me," Ethan replied gently. "You all deserve to feel safe." Breakfast passed with cheerful chatter. Olivia mostly stayed quiet, watching the twins, stealing glances at Ethan. She was still adjusting, her shoulders still tense, as if waiting for the other shoe to drop. But Ethan could sense something changing. The fear in her eyes was beginning to fade, if only a little. After the meal, Ethan stood up and asked, "Do the girls have everything they need? Clothes? Shoes?" Olivia hesitated. "They've been wearing the same few outfits for months. Everything's kind of falling apart. But we'll manage." "No," Ethan said with a soft smile. "We'll do better than manage. Come on, let's go shopping." Olivia opened her mouth to protest, but stopped. She looked down at her daughters, who were already bouncing with excitement at the mention of shopping. She knew she couldn't say no, not when Harper's face lit up like that, not when Hazel whispered, "Can I get shoes that don't have holes?" So she simply nodded. "Okay." A few hours later, they stood in the middle of a children's boutique downtown. Ethan had called ahead, so the shop was already prepared, clean racks of warm sweaters, soft pajamas, rain boots, and dresses that shimmered under the lights. Harper ran straight to a rack of sparkly skirts. "Mommy, can I have this one?" Olivia smiled, her voice thick with emotion. "If you like it, sweetheart." Hazel shyly picked up a pair of navy sneakers and looked at Ethan. "Do you think these are good?" "They're perfect," he said, kneeling down to her level. He wasn't just buying them shoes, he was giving them something they hadn't had in a long time: choice, dignity, joy. When they arrived back at the mansion, bags in hand and smiles stretching from ear to ear, the twins immediately ran to the garden to play with their new toys. Olivia lingered at the living room window, watching them chase each other beneath the afternoon sun. Ethan joined her. "They're good kids," he said softly. "They're my strength," Olivia replied. "They kept me going on days when I didn't think I could stand." Ethan turned to look at her. "And you kept them alive." "That's something not everyone could have done." Olivia stayed quiet, her throat tightened, but she refused to cry not again. "You're stronger than you know," Ethan added. She met his gaze, and for the first time, didn't look away. There was something in the stillness between them, something unspoken. A trust beginning to form. A feeling neither one could name, but both had started to feel. That night, after the girls had fallen asleep in their new pajamas, Olivia walked downstairs to the kitchen. Ethan was there, leaning against the counter, sipping a cup of tea. "Everything okay?" he asked. She nodded. "They're asleep. Out. Like little lights." He handed her a fresh cup. "You look tired." "I'm not used to resting," she said with a laugh. They sat in silence for a moment, sipping tea, listening to the fire crackle from the next room. It was quiet, but not uncomfortable. Finally, Ethan spoke. "Olivia, you don't have to carry it all by yourself anymore. You're not alone." She looked down into her cup. "I've been alone for so long," she whispered. "It's hard to let that go." "I know," Ethan said, "but you're safe now." Olivia nodded, not trusting herself to speak. But in that moment, a weight she'd carried for years felt just a little lighter. And in a home that once echoed with silence, something sacred had begun to grow, healing. Morning came gently to Ethan Marshall's estate. The first soft light of dawn filtered through Olivia's window as she sat quietly on the edge of the bed. Harper and Hazel lay tangled in cozy blankets beside her, their little chests rising and falling in the rhythm of peaceful sleep. It should have felt like relief, safety, warmth. But instead, Olivia's chest was tight with a familiar ache. Even in this beautiful home, with its safety, its warmth, its silence, she couldn't shake the feeling that it might all disappear, that someone would come knocking and declare it a mistake, that she'd wake up back on the street. Across the hall, Ethan stood at the window in his study, sipping black coffee and replaying the night before in his mind. He couldn't stop thinking about the way Olivia had smiled at her daughters when they came home from the clothing store, how her hands had trembled when she folded their new clothes, as if afraid they'd vanish. He could see it clearly. She didn't just need food or a place to stay. She needed time. She needed dignity. And most of all, she needed to stop believing that she had to suffer to deserve care. By the time Olivia came downstairs, dressed in clean jeans and a borrowed sweater, Ethan was waiting with a second cup of coffee. "Morning," he said, nodding toward the cup. "Thanks," she replied, accepting it without meeting his eyes. The silence between them was delicate, like a thread pulled too tight. Ethan didn't push, but he had questions. A few minutes later, as the girls played with coloring books in the adjacent sunroom, Ethan finally asked, "Can we talk?" Olivia stiffened, but nodded slowly. "I want to understand," he said gently. "Not because I'm judging you, because I care." "What happened? How did things get so bad?" Olivia swallowed hard. She looked down, fidgeting with the mug in her hands. "It's not a story I tell often." "I'm not here to fix you," he said. "But I am here to listen." It was the first time anyone had offered her that. She took a shaky breath and began. "After high school, I got swept up in someone I thought I loved, Jake Miller." She glanced up at Ethan, who nodded silently. He knew the name. He was everything back then. Confident, charming, untouchable. "I was young and stupid. I thought we'd build something together. Instead, I ended up pregnant." And he disappeared. The words came slowly at first, but the dam began to crack. "I thought I could handle it. I found work at a diner, moved into a one-bedroom apartment, did whatever I could. But then Harper got sick one winter. I missed shifts, fell behind on rent. Eventually, we were evicted." Ethan's jaw tightened. He didn't speak. He let her keep going. There were nights I stayed awake because I was scared someone would hurt us. I tried every shelter in the city. Most were full. Some weren't safe. She paused, her voice faltering. I didn't want the girls to see me cry, so I'd wait until they were asleep. And when there was no food, I told them I wasn't hungry. I didn't want them to feel how bad things really were. By now, her hands were shaking. Ethan reached across the table and gently placed his over hers. She didn't pull away. You survived, he said softly. That's more than most could have done. She shook her head, but barely. And I didn't ask for help. Not because I didn't want it, because I was ashamed, especially with someone like you. Ethan, you always had it together. In school, you were quiet, but smart, ambitious, and I treated you like you were invisible. Her eyes filled with tears, but she kept talking. You didn't deserve that. And now here you are, helping me, helping my girls. Ethan leaned in, his voice steady. I never cared that you ignored me back then. What matters is who we are now. And what I see in front of me is a mother who fought through hell to protect her daughters. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sound of the twins' laughter filtered in from the next room, bright, unbothered, innocent. Why are you doing this for us? Olivia whispered. Ethan didn't hesitate. Because I care. And because I can. She blinked, stunned by the simplicity of the answer. That night, as Olivia tucked Harper and Hazel into bed, she sat on the floor beside them, stroking their hair. Are you happy here? She asked. Harper nodded. It's warm. And there's toast every morning. Hazel giggled. And pillows that don't hurt your head. Olivia laughed softly, but her heart cracked open. For the first time in years, they were safe. And it wasn't because she had fought harder. It was because someone else, someone kind, had chosen to care. Downstairs, Ethan sat near the fireplace, flipping through paperwork, but unable to focus. He was thinking about Olivia. About the way she looked when she talked about her past, about the strength it took to admit that she had failed and the courage it took to keep going. He didn't want to rush her, but he knew that from this moment on, their story wasn't just one of rescue. It was one of rebuilding. Together. The next morning, Olivia Dawson awoke to the sound of quiet laughter. She opened her eyes slowly, letting the soft morning light wash over the room. On the carpeted floor, Harper and Hazel were sitting cross-legged, still in their pajamas, playing with a pair of small dolls that Mrs. Holloway, the housekeeper, had found tucked away in a guest closet. For a moment, Olivia simply watched them. Their little giggles, their calm voices, it all felt surreal. Just 48 hours ago, they had been sleeping on concrete under a thin blanket. Now, they were in a warm, safe room, sunlight dancing across the curtains, and not a single fear on their faces. She pressed a hand over her heart and closed her eyes. Thank you, she whispered silently. Downstairs, Ethan Marshall sat at the kitchen island, already dressed for the day. A cup of strong coffee in one hand, a financial report in the other. But his mind wasn't on market trends or quarterly projections. It was on her. When Olivia entered the room with Harper and Hazel at her side, her hair brushed, her posture still cautious but more grounded, Ethan smiled. Did you sleep all right? He asked. Hazel nodded and whispered, it was warm like sunshine. Olivia gave a small, grateful smile. Yes. Thank you. I don't remember the last time we all slept through the night. Ethan motioned toward the table, where Mrs. Holloway had laid out breakfast. "Please, eat. Take your time today. No rush." As the girls devoured bowls of oatmeal topped with fresh berries, Olivia sat quietly, unsure how to express the mix of emotions inside her. She wanted to help, to give something back. She felt restless, sitting still. After the girls finished and were led off to play in the garden, Olivia helped clear the dishes and brought them into the kitchen. She had already started rinsing a plate when Ethan walked in. "You don't have to do that," he said gently. "I know," she replied, keeping her eyes on the sink. "But I need to feel like I'm contributing, like I'm not just taking." Ethan sighed, stepping closer. "Then let's talk about the girls. Do they have everything they need?" She paused, thinking carefully. "They're okay, but their clothes are worn. Most of what they have doesn't fit anymore, and their shoes, they're falling apart." Ethan nodded. "Then let's go out today. We'll get whatever they need." Olivia's instinct was to refuse. Her hands stilled in the water. "That's not necessary. I can manage later, when I find work." "No discussion," Ethan said, with a quiet but firm smile. "It's not charity. It's dignity, and those girls deserve to feel normal again." Within the hour, Olivia and the twins were seated in the back of Ethan's town car, the girls bouncing with excitement. The children's clothing store downtown was bright, colorful, and full of laughter. Olivia hesitated at first, unsure how to even navigate such a place anymore, but Harper and Hazel quickly took the lead. "Mummy, look!" Harper held up a sparkly blue dress. "Can I try it?" Olivia felt tears rush to the back of her eyes. "Yes, sweetheart. Go ahead." Hazel, always the quieter twin, held up a pair of pink sneakers. "Me too, Mummy." Olivia knelt down beside her and cupped her cheek. "You too, baby. Whatever you need." Ethan watched from a few steps away, his heart full. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Seeing the girls laugh, watching Olivia begin to let her guard down, it was more than enough. Afterward, they visited a toy shop. "Just a couple of things," Ethan insisted. The girls picked coloring books and small stuffed animals. It wasn't about spoiling them, it was about letting them feel like children again. Lunch was at a cozy little restaurant on the corner. Harper and Hazel were practically glowing, chatting about dresses and new shoes. Olivia watched them, her hand resting gently on her coffee cup, her face soft. "You've done so much for us today," she said quietly, glancing at Ethan. He waved it off. "This is just what anyone should do." Olivia lowered her gaze. "No. It's more than that. Most people would have walked by." "You would have done the same if the roles were reversed," Ethan replied. She shook her head. Maybe not. You're a better person than I ever was to you. Back then, I didn't even notice you." Ethan leaned forward. "That doesn't matter anymore. The past is just that, the past. I'm not doing this because I expect anything. I'm doing it because you matter. You and those girls, you matter." His sincerity stunned her. She didn't know what to say. On the way back to the mansion, Harper fell asleep in her new dress, her arms wrapped tightly around her new teddy bear. Hazel leaned her head on Olivia's shoulder, eyelids fluttering. As they pulled into the driveway, Olivia glanced out at the tall hedges, the wide porch, the massive front doors. "I still don't feel like I belong here," she said softly. Ethan looked at her with kindness. "Belonging doesn't come from marble floors or chandeliers. It comes from people. And I think you're starting to find your place." That night, as she watched her daughters play in the garden, wearing their new shoes and laughing without fear, Olivia felt something she hadn't dared to feel in a long time: hope. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they were going to be okay. The sun had just begun to rise, casting a soft, amber glow across the wide windows of Ethan Marshall's home. The mansion, once a quiet shell of luxury, now pulsed with the gentle rhythm of a family finding its footing. And on this morning, that rhythm was laughter-light, genuine, and unmistakably young. From the upstairs hallway, the sound of Harper and Hazel giggling as they played on the carpet reached Olivia Dawson's ears. She sat on the edge of the bed, still in her robe, a cup of tea cooling in her hands. The girls were trying to name their new stuffed animals, whispering and laughing, as if they were sharing a secret from the world. Olivia smiled. The moment should have filled her with peace, and in many ways, it did. But underneath the comfort, she carried a weight, a quiet, persistent worry, a feeling she didn't quite know how to put into words, except that she didn't want to get too comfortable. She was grateful, but she also felt out of place. Downstairs, Ethan was already in the kitchen, reviewing paperwork while his coffee slowly went cold. His eyes weren't on the numbers, they were on the staircase. He could hear Olivia's footsteps above, and he wondered what she was thinking. She had been through so much, and even now, he could sense the walls she still kept around her heart. When Olivia and the twins came down for breakfast, Ethan greeted them with his usual warm smile. "Morning. Sleep well?" Hazel nodded, her curls bouncing. "I dreamed I was a princess." Harper giggled. "And I was the queen." Ethan chuckled. "Sounds like a royal knight." Olivia smiled, her hands resting gently on the girl's shoulders. "We all slept better than we have in a long time." After breakfast, while the twins ran off to the garden with Mrs. Holloway, Olivia and Ethan remained at the table. She reached for her mug and took a sip, unsure how to bring up what had been swirling in her mind. But Ethan, as always, noticed her hesitation. "You've got something on your mind," he said. Olivia nodded slowly. "I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done. For us. I've been thinking, I want to start looking for work again. I can't just keep taking without giving back." Ethan leaned forward. "There's no rush. You've been through a storm. You don't have to dive back into anything." "I know," Olivia said, "but I need to feel like I'm doing something for my daughters and for myself." He nodded thoughtfully. Then, after a pause, said, "What if we look at this a little differently? You mentioned before that you never got a chance to finish school. What if, instead of finding just any job, you went back to study? Finished your education?" The words took her by surprise. "Study?" Olivia shook her head. "I haven't been in school in years, and I couldn't ask you to help with something like that. You've already done too much." "This isn't about owing me anything," Ethan replied gently. "It's about building a future. For you. For Harper and Hazel. You'd have time, you'd have space to grow. You'd have support." Olivia looked down at her hands, her fingers tightening around the mug. "It's a beautiful thought, but I don't even know where I'd start. I've never felt smart enough for that kind of thing." Ethan leaned across the table, his voice steady. "You're smarter than you think. And stronger than you know. You just need someone to believe in you. And I do." The words hit her with quiet force. That evening, after the twins had gone to sleep, Ethan asked Olivia to join him in his office. When she walked in, she found a small envelope on the desk with her name written on it. Inside was a list of local community colleges and continuing education programs, all focused on business and entrepreneurship. "I thought these might be a good starting point," Ethan said. Olivia looked at the papers, then back at him. "You really think I can do this?" "I know you can." She was quiet for a long time. All her life, she had fought to survive. But this was different. This was a chance to thrive. A chance to rewrite the future, not just for herself, but for her daughters. "I'll think about it," she said softly, and she did. For days. She sat with the idea. She imagined herself in a classroom again, notebooks and textbooks and deadlines. It terrified her. But it also stirred something inside her that she hadn't felt in years: ambition. Finally, she gave Ethan her answer. "I'm going to do it." His smile, wide and proud, said everything she needed to hear. Within a week, Olivia was enrolled in a set of evening courses at a local college. Ethan had arranged everything else: a quiet space in the mansion for her to study, care for the girls while she was in class, and most importantly, his unwavering support. The first night of class, Olivia stood outside the college building, hands trembling as she clutched her course schedule. She almost turned around, but then she remembered Harper and Hazel. She remembered the way they'd looked at her that morning, proud and hopeful, and she walked inside. That night, after her first class, Olivia returned home and found Ethan waiting with a cup of tea. "How was it?" he asked. She exhaled, set down her bag, and smiled, a little shaky, but real. "It was hard and amazing." From that day forward, a new rhythm began. Mornings were for breakfast and playtime with the girls. Afternoons were for studying, evenings were for class. And between it all, Ethan was there, steady, kind, and patient. Olivia was no longer just surviving. She was becoming, and for the first time in a long time, she believed in the woman she was becoming too. It was a warm, golden afternoon in late spring. Olivia Dawson sat alone in the study room Ethan had set up for her. The soft ticking of the vintage clock on the wall was the only sound. Her textbooks lay open, her notes were neatly arranged, but her pen hadn't moved in over 20 minutes. She couldn't focus. Ever since Ethan had gently dropped the name Jake Miller into their conversation, something had shifted inside her. Jacob, the man who had disappeared the moment she told him she was pregnant, the man who had never held his daughters, the man who had never asked about them. And now, Ethan had tracked him down. When Ethan walked into the study and saw her sitting silently, her fingers interlocked tightly, he didn't speak right away. He simply sat across from her and waited. Olivia looked up. "You found him," she said softly. Ethan nodded. "I did. I needed to understand what happened to you, how someone like him could just walk away." She shook her head, pain flickering behind her eyes. "You didn't have to do that." "I know, but I did it for you, and for them." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of folded paper. He said he knew about the pregnancy, said he didn't want the responsibility, that disappearing was just easier. Olivia's jaw clenched. Her voice was calm, but firm. "He never asked about the girls?" "No, not once." There was a pause. Then she nodded slowly, her voice just above a whisper. "I always knew that would be his answer, but it still hurts to hear it." Ethan leaned forward. "You don't have to carry this alone anymore." Olivia looked down at her hands, then back up at Ethan. Her voice was steady now. "I think I need to speak to him. Not for closure, not for an apology, I just need to say what I've kept inside all these years. Ethan didn't argue. Whatever you need, I'll support you. The next morning, with the twins playing in the garden under Mrs. Holloway's watchful eye, Olivia quietly stepped outside. She was dressed simply denim jacket, soft blue blouse, hair pulled back. She took a deep breath and got into the car Ethan had arranged. He didn't go with her. He knew she needed to do this alone. She met Jake at a quiet coffee shop near the edge of town. The place had peeling window frames and a faded chalkboard menu, but it was quiet, and that's what she needed. When she walked in, he was already there. Older, thinner, and more weathered than she remembered. He looked up, surprised. "Olivia," he said. She sat down, her hands folded in her lap. "Jake." There was an awkward silence. "I didn't think I'd see you again," he said, sipping his coffee. "You weren't supposed to," she replied. "But I needed to say something." He raised an eyebrow. "Okay." "You left," Olivia began. "You left without ever checking on us. Without asking what I needed. You left two beautiful daughters in the world, daughters you've never even tried to meet." Jake stared at the table. "I know I messed up." "No," she said. "You didn't mess up. You made a choice. You chose not to be a father. You chose to disappear. And I lived with the consequences. I raised them alone. I watched them cry at night because they didn't understand why they didn't have a dad like other kids. And I told them every single time that they were loved, that they were wanted." Jake finally looked up. "I wasn't ready." Olivia held up a hand. "This isn't about you being ready. This is about you never trying, and I'm not here to beg you to be a part of their lives. I'm here to tell you that they have someone now, someone who shows up, someone who loves them, like they're his own." Jake didn't respond. Olivia stood up, her voice clear and calm. "You don't get to come back later and act like you care. The door is closed, and I'm finally at peace with that." She walked out without looking back. That night, as she stood in the doorway of the girls' bedroom, watching Harper and Hazel sleep side by side, Olivia felt something inside her shift. Not anger, not bitterness, just release. She stepped into the kitchen, where Ethan was finishing up some paperwork. "How did it go?" he asked gently. Olivia sat beside him and exhaled. "It went the way it needed to. I said what I had to say. And I don't expect anything from him. Not now, not ever." Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. "I'm proud of you." She smiled, soft, real, and free. "Me too." That evening, after the twins had been tucked in, Ethan handed Olivia a small gift, a beautiful leather-bound notebook and a silver pen. "What's this?" she asked. "A tool," he said. "To plan your future, write down your goals, everything you want to do, big or small. And I'll be right here, every step of the way." Olivia traced the edge of the notebook, feeling something shift inside her once more, something she hadn't felt in years. Hope that wasn't fleeting. Hope that felt like home. She leaned over and kissed Ethan gently on the cheek. "Thank you for never giving up on me." "I never will," he whispered. And for the first time in a long time, Olivia knew that she could finally close the door on the past and walk, boldly, into whatever came next. Ethan Marshall stood in the children's clothing store, quietly observing as Harper and Hazel darted between racks of brightly colored dresses and shelves stacked with tiny shoes. The store was lively, full of laughter from other families, but for Ethan, the only thing that mattered at that moment was the light returning to those little girls' eyes. "Harper," the more outgoing of the twins, held up a sparkly blue dress and turned to her mom with wide, hopeful eyes. "Mummy, can I really get this?" Olivia knelt down, brushing a curl from Harper's cheek, her voice caught in her throat. "Yes, sweetheart, you can." Across the aisle, Hazel, who had been quiet for most of the day, clutched a pair of new sneakers against her chest. She didn't speak, but the look in her eyes was enough. She didn't need to ask. Olivia smiled and nodded, her heart swelling with emotion. Ethan, standing back to give them space, couldn't help but smile. This was why he had insisted they come. Not to spend money, not to play hero, but to restore a little joy to the lives of two little girls who had been through far too much. And to remind Olivia that she wasn't alone anymore. After they checked out bags filled with clothes, shoes, and a few carefully selected toys, Ethan led them to a cozy family restaurant nearby. The twins chatted excitedly the entire time, their voices high with laughter. Harper told a story about a squirrel she once saw dancing in a tree. Hazel, still shy but warming up, chimed in with quiet giggles and gestures. Olivia watched them in awe. It had been so long since she'd seen her daughters this alive. "You've done so much for us today, Ethan," Olivia said, glancing across the table. Her voice was low, serious. "I don't even know how to thank you." Ethan took a sip of his coffee and leaned forward. "There's no need to thank me. Every child deserves to feel safe, and every mother deserves to see her kids smile." Olivia looked away for a moment, guilt creeping into her chest. "You're a much better person than I was to you back then," she whispered. The weight of her past, her regrets, still lingered, no matter how warm the present felt. Ethan gently shook his head. "Olivia, we all have chapters we don't read out loud. The past is the past. What matters now is the future, and I believe in yours." By the time they returned to the mansion, Harper and Hazel were bursting with excitement. They ran to the garden in their new outfits, twirling and playing with the kind of joy that made it hard to believe they had spent nights sleeping on cold sidewalks. Olivia stood at the window, watching them through the glass. She felt something shift deep inside her, slow, cautious flicker of hope. Ethan stood beside her, his voice soft. "They're incredible girls." "They're my strength," Olivia said. "Even when I had nothing, they were everything." Ethan looked at her, admiring the quiet resilience in her voice. "You're stronger than you think, Olivia. What you've done for them, it's more than most people could ever understand." She turned to him, her eyes glassy but steady. "Thank you, Ethan. For today, for everything." "You don't have to thank me," he replied. "Just know you're not in this alone anymore." As the sun began to set over the garden and the twins' laughter echoed through the halls, Olivia realized something she hadn't dared to feel in a long time. Peace. The day had given her more than clothes or food. It had given her a glimpse of a life she thought was gone forever. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the road ahead could be beautiful. As days turned into weeks, a quiet sense of rhythm began to form in Ethan Marshall's once lonely mansion. Mornings were now filled with the sound of laughter. Amelia and Clara, his twin daughters, would dash through the hallways in their new dresses, chasing sunlight and dreams. Camilla had become a steady presence in the home, nurturing, learning, healing. Still, there was something in her eyes, a shadow that never fully left. Ethan noticed it one evening as they sat on the porch, sipping tea in the fading light. The girls were inside, drawing stick figures and animals on the kitchen floor. Camilla was quiet, her fingers gently cradling the warm mug, her gaze distant. "You've been somewhere else lately," Ethan said softly. Camilla looked up, startled, then forced a smile. "I'm here." He didn't press, he knew better now. But later that night, after the girls were asleep, she approached him. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I need to talk to Marcus." Ethan stiffened. The name alone made his blood boil. Marcus, the man who abandoned her and their daughters, the reason they were left on the streets, hungry and hopeless. "I thought you said you never wanted to see him again," Ethan replied, trying to keep his tone even. "I didn't. I still don't. Not for me," she said. "But I need closure. For Amelia and Clara. I need to be sure there's nothing left to hope for, so I can finally stop wondering. So I can truly move on." Ethan looked at her, and the pain in her eyes cut deeper than anger ever could. He nodded. The next day, with Ethan's help, she found Marcus's contact. They arranged a brief meeting in a public park near the city center. Camilla chose to go alone. She didn't want the girls anywhere near it, and Ethan, despite every protective instinct in his body screaming otherwise, respected her wish. Marcus was already waiting when she arrived. He looked older, worn down by choices and consequences. He barely met her eyes. "You look different," he said flatly. "I've changed," she replied. There was a long silence before she spoke again. "I didn't come here to argue. I don't want anything from you. I just need to know, did you ever care? Even for a second?" Marcus shrugged. "I don't know. I wasn't ready. I was young, stupid. I still am. Maybe." Camilla felt a pang in her chest. Not because she wanted his apology, she didn't, but because it confirmed what she had feared. He had never looked back, never wondered about the daughters he left behind, never grieved the years lost. "They're beautiful," she said, her voice firm and smart and kind. "Everything you chose not to be a part of." He looked away, saying nothing. "I wanted to believe maybe you'd want to know them someday, but I don't think you even deserve that." Camilla stood up. Her hands were steady, her breath calm. "This is the last time I'll ever think about what might have been," she said. "Goodbye, Marcus." She turned and walked away, the weight in her chest finally starting to lift. When she returned home, Ethan was in the garden with the girls, helping them build a makeshift fort out of cushions and picnic blankets. Clara spotted her first and ran into her arms, followed by Amelia. Ethan watched as Camilla knelt, hugging them tight, tears slipping down her cheeks, but they were different this time, not tears of sadness, but of release. Later that evening, as they sat in the quiet of the living room, Camilla told Ethan everything. He listened without interrupting, his hand resting gently over hers. "So, it's over," she said. "For real this time." Ethan leaned closer. "I'm proud of you." That took courage. She nodded. "It was hard, but I needed to let that part of my life die, so something new could finally grow." And for the first time in a very long time, Camilla felt free, not because she had erased the past, but because she had faced it and walked away stronger. Spring arrived quietly at the Marshall estate, wrapping the property in sunlight and blooms. For the first time in a long while, Camilla's mornings weren't filled with worry or doubt. Instead, they started with giggles from the twins, the smell of fresh coffee, and the familiar warmth of a place that finally felt like home. Ethan had taken to walking the garden each morning with the girls, pointing out which flowers were blooming, letting them guess which birds were singing overhead. Camilla watched from the porch with a hand on her belly. She was now visibly pregnant, her form glowing with the gentle strength of motherhood. The past no longer haunted her. Marcus had been a closed chapter, one she would never reopen. What remained was peace and the future. One evening, as the family shared dinner under a canopy of twinkling lights in the backyard, Ethan tapped his glass and stood. "I have something to say," he announced with a soft smile, eyes flicking to Camilla. The girls, now in their new favorite dresses, stopped eating and looked up, wide-eyed. Ethan turned to Camilla. "When I first saw you again, I didn't know what I was stepping into. But I knew I couldn't walk away." Camilla's eyes glistened. "You changed me, Camilla. You and these two incredible little girls. You gave my life meaning again. And now, with a baby on the way, I can't imagine facing tomorrow without you." He knelt, pulling a small box from his pocket. "Camilla, will you marry me?" The silence that followed was pure magic. The twins gasped. Camilla covered her mouth in shock, her heart pounding so loudly she could barely breathe. "Yes," she finally whispered. 1,000 times yes. The twins jumped up, cheering, wrapping their tiny arms around both of them. That night, as Camilla curled up next to Ethan, she couldn't stop smiling. Her life had once felt like a broken story, a rough start, a detour, a dead end. But now, she understood it was only the prologue. Their wedding was held, a few weeks later, in the backyard under the magnolia tree. It was small, just close friends, Ethan's trusted staff, and two flower girls named Amelia and Clara, who took their roles more seriously than anyone expected. Camilla walked down the aisle in a simple ivory gown, barefoot in the grass, carrying a bouquet of wildflowers picked by the girls. When they exchanged vows, there were no dramatic speeches, just promises, spoken from the heart, promises to love, to listen, to grow, and to be there, no matter what storms life might bring. Afterward, the family danced in the twilight. The girls twirled barefoot under string lights, their laughter echoing through the air. Ethan held Camilla close, her head on his shoulder, his hand resting gently on her growing belly. "I never thought I'd have this," she whispered. "You deserved it all along," he replied. As night settled, Camilla stood by the nursery, watching Ethan tuck the twins into bed. They were still talking about the wedding, asking if they could wear their flower crowns to breakfast the next day. Camilla smiled. This was home, not the mansion. Not the garden, but the people inside it, the love they shared. The second chance she never thought she'd get. Outside, the wind rustled the trees. Life would still bring its challenges, but whatever came next, she was ready. Because this time, she wasn't facing it alone. Ethan Marshall's journey reminds us that life can offer second chances in the most unexpected moments. What began as a fleeting encounter on a street corner turned into a powerful story of redemption, compassion, and the strength of human connection. Through Ethan's kindness and unwavering support, Camilla found the courage to rebuild her life, not just for herself, but for her children. And in giving her that chance, Ethan rediscovered a purpose that went beyond wealth or status. This story speaks to something deeper than romance. It's about recognizing someone else's pain and choosing to act. It's about not letting the past define the future and believing that people can grow, heal, and love again, no matter where they've been. Ethan didn't offer help to rewrite history. He offered help to write a better tomorrow. In a world that often feels rushed and disconnected, Ethan's actions remind us that showing up for someone with patience, with empathy, and with genuine care can change everything. Sometimes, the most powerful transformation doesn't come from grand gestures, but from simply choosing to stand beside someone when they need it most.